Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community, a partnership for generations. Member FDIC. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. In this two-segment episode, photographer John LaTourelle takes us along on a fitness shoot, then into his studio to retouch the photos, then again to a wedding on the shores of Lake Bemidji. Then, Bemidji filmmaker Jason Ewert takes us along as he creates the experimental film Feed the Wolf.
I'm John LaTourelle, and I run John LaTourelle Photography. I specialize in portrait work, so I work at my studio downtown in Bemidji. As a photographer, I stick mostly with portrait work, so I do weddings, I do fitness photography, and I do senior portraits. Last June, we did a fitness shoot with Chrissy Fenner, and she was in the middle of prep for one of her competitions. So we started shooting the alleyway, and I chose the alleyway because I like texture. So when I'm out shooting something like, especially a fitness model, for my style, I want grit and I want some texture. So the alleyway gave me the option of doing that. It was also a sunny day, so sticking into an alleyway helps with blocking out the sun. So what we're gonna do is I kind of want you to lean back against the wall because we really want to stick the abs out, and then we're gonna spray down the abs, and we don't have to worry too much about your arms. We'll get a little bit on your legs. And then we're gonna drag this light across that way and get some heavy contrast. So my style is more on the dramatic side. And so I shoot in the greenery, but for something like fitness, they're cut, they're dry, they've been prepping for anywhere from 16 to 20 plus weeks where they've been in a calorie deficit and they're shredded. And so you want to show every aspect of their muscles. That's what they've worked hard for, that's what they're celebrating by doing the shoot, so you want to capture that. So the grit allows me to match that environment almost to what their body is going through. It's gone through some battles and you've arrived at this point where you're ironclad, and so using an alleyway or something gritty just gives me the ability to add that different element, so it has a little bit more depth to the photo than just, say, a blurred out background. Let's look a little bit more to the left from where you're at. Not quite so much. Right there, okay? And go ahead and flex in. Everything is about lighting. To carve out individual muscles, and you want to see the abs, you want to see the definition of the abs, you want to see the veins and the different muscle groupings. So the challenges are getting a model to be able to flex into all those muscles at the same time. So it seems weird, but it's actually a really challenging thing to do. Getting them turned just right, getting the muscles popping just right, getting the light to shape it just right. If you take abs and you light them straight on with what the camera is shooting, it fills in all the shadows and you lose some of the depth that's there. So we use strobes up high and we cast shadows downward, or we'll use the natural light with the reflector and try to cast shadows that emphasize the different muscle groups. So it's paying attention to, okay, are you flexed into your arm? And if you flexed into your arm, did you lose some flexing in your abs? If you've lost flex in your abs, what are you doing with your legs? So as a photographer, you have to continually scan the image, and you take a shot and then you take another shot, and it's like, okay, shoot, we lost the abs on that one, so let's flex into the abs and check the legs again. And so it adds up 10-15 seconds between a shot to make sure everything is just popping just right. Yeah, we're gonna do something I think more maybe right in the middle of the alley. So I'm gonna bring the light out and get it up by the air conditioning here. Things I'll look for is light reflecting off of a building that casts a side directional. If I shoot next to a lake, the light reflects off the lake and casts shadows off to the side. So those are all things that I'm anticipating and looking for when I'm out shooting. That's perfect right there. So let's get you back against the wall. We like that light there. Just looking down, I want to keep that arm down. And then looking straight out this way. Okay, that's good. I think we're ready to go to the next spot. So after the alleyway, we moved over to this old railroad car that used to be a local restaurant. It's kind of shut down right now. I went to that location because it's got that same element that I wanted to bring. It's rusty, it's been sitting there for a while, it's decaying. It's got this green color, which is really going to make the model pop, especially when the strobe hits. I can use the strobes to cast shadows onto the box car. This is beautiful. Okay, let's get your face a little bit this way. Keep your body turned in tight like it was, and then face just a tiny bit back towards the light. Okay, flex in hard. Okay. Let's turn the shoulder, chin down into the shoulder right there. Let's get a smile from you. Let's turn your face. You're kind of looking away, eyes closed again. Perfect, okay. You can keep that hand up too, like up. Okay, so we are going to be editing some of the photos from the fitness shoot that we had with Chrissy. I'm going to start off in my editing program Lightroom, and from there we'll do some basic color correction and we'll pull them into Photoshop and do the finishing work there. So with this one here, you can see the subject's a little bit bright because of the light that we use on there. So you can also see there's a little bit of clipping in the corner. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of cropping. And this is going to most likely take the softbox out of the corner as well. So I'm not going to need to worry about that. So I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit on her skin and then we will go from there. So I'm just going to kind of key in some values. So Lightroom is a non-destructive program, meaning that it doesn't make any changes to the actual file until you export it from the program. So everything I'm doing is just a temporary solution until I export it into a JPEG. I'm going to bring a little bit of brightness into the shadows to take out some of the contrast that the light created, because we're going to be adding some here shortly. And then we're going to take the color temperature. It's a little bit orange. It looks actually pretty natural, but I'm going to be adding some of that again in post, so I want to just lower that a little bit as well. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a blue tint. And we're going to pull out some of the saturation, because for fitness shoots I use kind of a gritty finish. Add a little bit of what they call clarity, which is just going to kind of sharpen some of the edges. So you can see here we've gone from a really bright finished product to kind of a dull, not a lot of color added into it, kind of muted. And then we would go and do an export on this photo. So the export, I want to make sure it's a high resolution file, and then we choose the destination folder for where we want this file to end up. Initially I go through and I do what's called a cull, and I'll go through all the photos we took and I'll just get rid of the shots that I don't think I want to edit, I don't think turned out nice. You know, we took probably 150 photos when we were out there, but I narrowed it down to 11 that this is what I want the final product to be. So the nice thing about Lightroom then too is all the changes I'd made to this first file, I can actually just bulk select the rest of them and apply the same settings, and then just go in and kind of have to tweak a little bit more individually depending on the exposure would have changed a little bit because of the strobe, but for the most part they're going to be pretty close. I'm very picky about what I want my final product to look like. I have the vision from the get-go, so I know what the final product's going to look like before I go. So having shot with Chrissy a few times, I know what she's looking for. We have the option of adding and kind of intensifying some of the muscle look in post, just to add back the contrast that was taken away while shooting, so that it will have a nice finished look to it versus just being kind of flat. So anything you see from a professional photographer has usually gone through what they call a post-processing. And like I said, what you see in the back of the camera is going to look completely different than what the final product looks like, because when you're shooting raw there's no contrast, and so it really eliminates a lot of the reality of what you actually see in the scene. And so now it's a matter of recreating the reality of the scene, but also putting an artistic twist on it as well. That I had a vision for the shoot when I started, and so I wanted the final product to resemble that. So it's muting the colors. She's wearing white, and gray and some of the blacks, so it's going to just kind of draw more of the attention straight to the subject versus the bright green rail car. And it's going to add a little bit of punch to the texture by muting it, so that you can kind of get more of the finer details out of the rust. So if we like zoom in here, you know, like all these details on the side of the rail car, I want them to be very textured. So that's something that we're going to work on with the final edit as well. But like all these little where the paint is scraped off and missing, you know, that's all a part that I wanted in the final image. So when people see my photos, I want them to know, like, oh, that's a John LaTourelle photography image. You know, I don't want to look the same as all the other photographers in the area. So the editing is where, and you kind of put that twist in the most. So in Lightroom, I can do very basic editing. Photoshop is kind of advanced editing where we can add a vignette and a few like skin touch-ups that are a lot easier to use. What we want to do here is we want to add in a little bit of some texture. So we're going to be running a filter, and I'm running what's called a Bleach Bypass. And the Bleach Bypass is going to help me mute the colors down as well. We've already muted the color, so I'm not going to touch that. But it's going to add some contrast, and it's going to add some texture. And you can kind of see if we go through the sliders here, we can affect how much we want. I usually go pretty low numbers. The contrast is a minimum set at, I think, of 20. So it'll have to go there. And like I said, all the little subtleties added together make up a huge change in the final image. So if you go too overboard with something, if you add another process later on in editing, it could really mess that up. So we try to do everything very small and subtle. Now that we're about set, I'm going to go in and add a vignette and do a little bit of a sharpening. I can adjust the size of the vignette. So I'm going to have it fairly large and just kind of tone down the outsides. And we can go very dark to not quite so dark. And so I'm going to find a little happy medium here. We'll zoom in. You can kind of see what a final edit would look like. We'll go in and zoom in on her face and just see if we have any stray hairs here that we'll just kind of pull out really quick here. And that would be a finished product. So this is a straight out of camera shot, and that's the final. Aside from fitness photography, I also do weddings. So last September in 2017, I did a wedding at Rutgers Birchmont Lodge and Bemidji State Park is kind of where we spent time doing their photos. And it was a beautiful fall day. It was overcast. The colors were popping, which was always a fantastic thing because you never know when the colors are going to pop, if it's going to be late September or early October. So it ended up being a little bit of a rainy morning when I met them at Rutgers, but it ended up being a great day. So for this wedding, this was Eric and Alyssa, and they're actually related to the fitness model that we did the shoot with. So Alyssa is Chrissy's younger sister. So weddings are a lot of fun for me. None of them are the same. Each wedding is different. So approaching a wedding day, I have quite a few conversations with my couple before the day even happens. We've done usually an engagement shoot that leads up to that point so that they're kind of comfortable with how I am behind the camera and working with them, and they realize my expectations and I can understand their expectations. Because each wedding is different, each couple is different, and so you really have to cater to your clientele. So my biggest rule for the wedding day is just to keep the bride calm and relaxed. A lot of weddings we end up doing what we call the getting ready shots, where the bride is getting ready in the cabin, the groom is getting ready in the cabin. So when I'm working in an area like the cabin, it's very limited on space. So I like to create kind of a clutter-free space when it gets to the images of like the bride and her mother getting into their dress, doing up the back. You know, we spend some time photographing them, having their makeup done and having their hair done, because it's just an integral part of their wedding day story. So working in that area, then I look for the light is probably the most important thing. I find an area that's got good light, and then I'll clean the stuff out of that area. So this one, the cabin is overlooking the lake, so I have the light reflecting in through the window, so I have a nice dramatic light which fits my style. It's not dramatic in a gritty way though, it's more of a very elegant drama to it, where you have a nice soft light, highlight, and it falls into shadow, which creates a lot of dimension in the images, and that's something I want to use. So like posing the mother doing up the back of the dress or putting on the jewelry, I have to make sure that she's not standing right behind the bride. So you'll see me off-center her a little bit off the shoulder so that the light has a chance to hit her face as well. Because as much as it is the bride's day, like the family's involved and her mother's important to her. They've showed them what a marriage looks like through all these years and to bring that in. So having the mother there for the getting ready photos is just moments that the daughter and mom have that you just don't get all that often, you know, in the busyness of life and things. So I just kind of use that to give it a start. And it's just moments that you're not going to see during the day, because once you get into the wedding day schedule, you're popping through photos like the couple, we got to get the wedding party, we got to get family photos, grandparents, and the ceremony is going to start. So it's more of a relaxed time. Like it's high activity, but it's the bride with her girls and they're having fun, or the groom and the groomsmen having a brew before things kind of really get underway. So having photos of those times in your life is just, I think, kind of nice for them to have after the fact. And you'd be surprised at how many of those candid photos actually get selected by the bride and groom for their albums or their edits, because those are the moments that stick out the most in the blur of things. Dirk. So they wanted to do a few photos with the dog, and so thankfully they have a well-trained dog. So I've done quite a few weddings now where we've had a pet present. If they're trained, it makes the day a lot easier than if they're not, especially for like doing photos of a couple with the dog or with just the groom and the dog. The dog is usually, I can get their attention, but getting them to sit in one spot is usually the biggest challenge. So we did a couple shots of just the dog, and then we did some with the groomsmen too, where they all wanted to crack open a cold one on the day of, and the dog partook in a little bit of beer as well. And so it ends up making a fun memory for the day of everybody kind of just more relaxed, hanging out, you know. So that's kind of what is nice about it. You've got some of your closest friends in there, and you've got the bros, so to speak, and you get to just have some of those quiet moments while you're waiting for things to gear up. And it's nice to have that level of support around you.
I was going to say, it's like, look at the camera. I was like, oh, here we go.
So once we had the bride and groom ready to go, we moved over to Bemidji State Park, and we found a little trail kind of leading off, and there was an overlook on the lake, which happened to work out perfectly this day because it was overcast. Had it been sunny, it's a different story. We wouldn't have been able to use that spot, but it was a spot that was special the bride and groom had picked out. And so we moved from the cabins then to do their first look. And so the first look is designed in a way that the bride and groom get to see each other for the first time. It's more of a private event than, say, what happens at the ceremony. The thing I like about those first looks is it's very intimate. The bride is all dressed up, the groom is all dressed up, and they're seeing each other, and it's on this emotional day. And so a lot of the times the emotions will tend to like overwhelm and you get tears or something. It's just a really special, quiet moment between the bride and groom where they just get to spend time together in the heat of this and just relax.
Sure. 1, 2, 3.
Speaking for my own wedding, like having to wait until the ceremony to see your bride can add a lot of stress to the big day. So for a lot of my couples, especially for like Eric and Alyssa, having this special moment and place that was meaningful to them to see each other for the first time and to have in their photographs just adds another touch to the album. After the first look was done, I was able to kind of negotiate the angles and bring in the shoreline and the colors. Being overcast really makes the colors pop out a little bit more. It keeps the detail in the sky. So you get just this really nice line of color kind of framing them in, and you've got this lake in the background and they're framed in with the sky and the lake and these beautiful colors around them. So the challenge for me is I want to create something new every time I go out, and I want to create something that's beautiful, that's going to make them stop and look and wonder if that's really them, if that's really their wedding photo. I like the reactions.
My name's Jason Ewert. I'm a filmmaker. I'm from Bemidji, Minnesota, and I put together Feed the Wolf. I'm not for a lack of content in Bemidji. Like, there's something always happening politically, socially. That's why I'm doing the film, because there's just so much. It's just a melting pot of race, of money, of politics, of everything.
Bemidji, we come alive with the sky, the scent of water and wind, the belief that with time new flowers grow from the ashes of the ones who came before.
Feed the Wolf is a short film, an experimental visual poetry style film. It's based on a poem that Big Moberg had adapted from a poem that I had commissioned for a commercial that I was going to make. And when I got the poem back from who I commissioned it from, it was just too good for a commercial. And so I put it on the back burner. And when I had an opportunity to work with Region 2 Arts Council for a grant, I immediately thought of that poem. And I thought, what can I make with this? I started with going to the International Wolf Center in Ely by filming the wolves there. And because I knew I was going to need wolves in it, and it kind of goes along with Feed the Wolf. The poem is based on the parable of two wolves that are fighting inside of us, and the wolf that is fed is the wolf that wins. It can be compared to like good and bad, harmony and disunity, and whatever one you feed is the one that is going to be the one that grows. I really think this community is divided in many ways. Economically, politically, racially, there's a lot of tension. And I believe that I don't know how to solve that, but I would like to bring attention to it. I think that's what this poem does, and I think that's what this short film does, is if anything, maybe would inspire people to choose unity over hate, would choose life over death. I would want to show people that there is an option. I didn't know much about what I wanted in the film after shooting the wolves, but I did know that Dave was going to be my narrator. He was going to adapt the poem in his own style, his own flavor, and I knew that I wanted him in the video somehow. In my mind, I had him walking down the street. He showed up at Paul and Babe. At the beginning of Guillermo del Toro's movie Kronos, he has this reflection on the ground where an actor steps into it. So in my mind, I wanted to do that. I brought a water bottle down to Paul and Babe. I sprinkled some water on the ground and kind of had the reflection of Paul and Babe in the background. We tried it a couple times, so I just went with it. Yeah, let's go for it. But filming him downtown was really cool. I wanted to show that the city was moving. Dave was moving very much like the river as it talks in the poem. At that point, it talks about a city on a river. And so I knew that I wanted him walking, that I'd be following behind him, kind of representing that movement, if anything. What really helped the story of Feed the Wolf was the events of the summer of 2017. I think it was a very politically charged summer. A lot was happening of current events, and the community of Bemidji had many events themselves. We had the Unite Against Hate rally in response to a racist event happening. We also had community events that promoted unity. At Diamond Point Park, at Harmony Co-op. There was just so many different events, and I just showed up with a camera and filmed them. It just so happened to work very well with Feed the Wolf. No, it was very accidental, but thank goodness that it worked out. And that part was the experimental part, because really what I had intended isn't what came out in the end. But really, in the end, it made itself. And the piece itself is something that would either create questions, create dialogue. Yeah, I'd hate to say that editing is where the magic happens, but it's where the storytelling takes place, I think. I think editing is the most important. And as a designer, editing is the closest thing to creating. Even more so, I think a lot of filmmakers would think that production, the filming of the camera, is their kind of creating part. But for me, that's just the beginning. I think editing is really where the creating happens for me. For sure on this project, because I had no idea where I was going with it. So the editing kind of, the story came out even where I didn't think it would come. And it kind of took on a path of its own, and I just kind of followed it. The really hard thing for me at the end of this was I don't really want to do another serious piece, because it's hard to talk about. Because in the beginning, I wanted to make something cool that can be identified to Bemidji. I didn't really know what I was doing, and to explain to people at film festivals and other events, explaining why did you make it? I made it because the opportunity was there to make it, not because I wanted this grand idea to be exposed or explained. At the end of this, looking back, after the film has been done and after it's been at film festivals and people have responded to it in very positive ways, the only thing that I really want to accomplish with the story is that it would raise awareness that these two wolves exist, that there is peace and love and hate and division, and that we can choose one or the other, and it really is just a choice.
Thank you so much for watching. Join us again on Common Ground. If you have an idea for Common Ground in North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click Local Shows. Episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground was made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community, a partnership for generations, member FDIC. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people November 4th, 2008.